The turkey had been on the table for 11 minutes before her father cleared his throat in the particular way that meant he'd rehearsed something. Mara noticed it the way she noticed everything now. From a slight distance, like a nurse checking vitals on a patient she already suspected was declining. Denny sat at the head of her own table, the way he always did, because their mother had steered him there before Mara could say anything. The same way she'd steered him through 3 failed businesses and 2 marriages, and a house he'd already lost. "We need to talk about the house," her father said. He slid the paper across the table between the cranberry sauce and the gravy boat, and for a moment Mara thought it was a card, something sentimental, until she saw the county seal notice to vacate. 7 days. Her mother smiled. Not the warm smile, the other one. The one that arranged itself before a decision had even finished being announced. As if agreement were a formality Mara would eventually catch up to. "Your brother needs this house," she said. "He has the kids, you understand." Mara looked at the paper for a long moment. She didn't ask who had drafted it, though she already suspected. Her father had always had opinions about law he'd never studied. Confidence built entirely on forms he'd downloaded and never had reviewed. She thought about telling them what the house had cost her. Not the number, though she could have recited it. To the dollar. 5 years of double shifts in the ICU during the worst of the pandemic. The overtime that had taken 3 years off some invisible ledger of her own health. Not the number, but the weight of it. The nights she'd come home too tired to eat and stood in the kitchen anyway, grateful for walls that were hers. She didn't say any of it. In this family, defending herself was mistaken for guilt. She had learned that a decade ago, the first time she tried. So she picked up the water pitcher and started refilling glasses, starting with her mother's, because that was easier than looking at her father. "Say something," Denny said. He sounded almost embarrassed, which was new. Usually he had the decency to at least avoid her eyes. "What would you like me to say?" He didn't answer. Nobody did. The gravy went cold in its boat while her father waited for a reaction that wasn't coming, and her mother's smile held its shape a beat too long, like a held breath. The knock came at 6:40. Mara knew, before she opened the door, that it would be Claudia. She'd seen her, weeks earlier, watching from her own porch, when the moving truck idled outside for no reason on a Tuesday, her father's rental car parked half a block down, like he thought no one would recognize it. Mara had mentioned it to Claudia in passing then. Not as a plan, just as a worry. The way you tell a friend something you're afraid might become true. Claudia stood on the step now in her coat, holding a cream-colored envelope with both hands, the way people hold things they know matter. "I wasn't going to interrupt your dinner," she said, "but I saw the car in the driveway again." Mara let her in. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when they sense a shift they can't name yet. "Who's this?" her father asked, already irritated, already assuming an audience meant an ally. "Claudia," Mara said. "My neighbor. This isn't a conversation for neighbors." "It is now," Claudia said, and set the envelope on the table, in the space where the eviction notice had been, as if reclaiming the spot. Her father opened it the way he did most things, quickly, expecting to be right. Mara watched his face change while he read, watched the particular collapse of a man, discovering that the ground he'd been standing on for the last 20 minutes had never existed. The letter was from the title company. 6 months earlier, after a scare with a burst pipe and a conversation with a lawyer about what would happen to the house if anything happened to her, Mara had quietly moved the property into a trust. Claudia, who'd gone through something similar after her own divorce, had walked her through it, sat with her at the title office on a Thursday off, hadn't made a thing of it. It wasn't dramatic. It was paperwork. It was the kind of decision people made when they'd stopped expecting anyone else to protect them. The eviction notice her father had handed across the table wasn't just premature. It was addressed to an owner who no longer existed on paper, a mismatch he would have caught if he'd checked anything beyond a template and his own certainty. "This isn't right," he said, though he didn't specify what he meant. The trust, or the fact that his plan had failed, or something further back that he'd never once said out loud. Her mother's smile was gone now. Not replaced by anger, just gone, like something that required maintenance she'd stopped performing. Denny said nothing. He looked at his plate. Mara didn't gloat. She didn't explain the trust, or the lawyer, or the years of nights that had paid for the roof over their heads that evening. She just reached over and took the eviction notice back, folded it once, and set it beside her own plate, the way you'd set aside something you intended to deal with later, when it no longer had teeth. "The turkey's getting cold," she said. They finished dinner, in a silence that wasn't peace, exactly. More like a held note, waiting for a resolution that didn't come. Her father left early. Her mother hugged her at the door in the automatic way, the hug that had never once contained an apology and wouldn't start now. Denny mumbled something about calling her during the week. He wouldn't. Claudia stayed to help with the dishes, the two of them working in a comfortable quiet that felt, in its plainness, like the opposite of everything that had happened at the table. "You okay?" Claudia asked, drying a plate. Mara considered the question honestly, the way she'd learned to consider most things now, without performance, without needing the answer to be bigger than it was. "The house is mine," she said. That part settled. She didn't say the rest, that nothing else was settled, that her mother's smile would return next year as if none of this had happened, that Denny would need something again before spring. She'd learned not to expect the whole family to heal just because one threat had failed. She dried her hands on the towel and looked around the kitchen. Her kitchen, still hers, holding the smell of a dinner no one would remember fondly, and found, to her own quiet surprise, that she could live with the trade.